Life Audio.
Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployer from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from annieyorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips as these experts and their guests dive into the hottest topics in homeschooling. Whether you're a seasoned homeschooler, just considering this path, or anywhere in between, you don't want to miss a minute of these enlightening conversations that will empower your child to thrive in their homeschool environment. Empowering Homeschool Conversations is starting right now. Join us to give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
I'm your host, Annie Yorty. Today, we're going to talk about growing great writers for God's glory. And we hope you leave this conversation with some useful strategies to help your diverse learners love writing. And my guest today is Heidi Vertrees. Let me tell you something about Heidi before we get started. Heidi is an educator who taught in public, Christian, and charter schools for many years. She also homeschooled her own children and has taught classes for other homeschoolers. Much of her teaching experience includes children and teens who benefit from learning accommodations. In addition to teaching, Heidi was trained as a journalist. She worked in publishing as both a writer and an editor. She previously wrote Sunday school curriculum for a national publisher. She also worked for a publisher of school curriculum to adapt social studies programs for learners with special needs. Now, for many years, Heidi has led a child evangelism fellowship, Good News Club, where she teaches weekly Bible lessons to elementary-aged kids after school. And she is the author of Victor Survives Being a Kid, an award-winning book for middle grades. The reader joins the adventure through the perspective of a Hispanic boy in middle school as he looks back on his fifth grade year. Heidi also posts a blog at newsongpress.net to help people teach children fun and interesting ways to write from a Christian perspective. So Heidi, welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. I know firsthand the ups and downs of homeschooling a struggling or reluctant writer. And in my days, or in my book, From Ignorance to Bliss, one of the chapters tells the story of my daughter's journey with writing. And many days I was at my wit's end. I think I could have used some of the tips we're going to talk about today. And I think anyone listening is going to get a lot out of this discussion and be encouraged as they teach their children to write. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you, Annie Yorty. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to share any tips and ideas that might encourage others. I'd like to say a quick prayer, if we may.
Absolutely.
Dear Heavenly Father, please bless our listeners. Please help them to know we love them and care about them and want them to find some gems in what we're sharing today so that they can have the joy of teaching their children and their children can be blessed. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Heidi. Let's just start off because many of our listeners may not be familiar with you. So I'd like to give you a chance to tell folks here why you are so passionate about teaching children to enjoy and to develop their skills at writing.
All right. Well, writing is a powerful tool and a way to express oneself. Children need to be helped along with that, and especially to help them find their own voice in their writing. I'm going to say it a little bit interestingly in that when I first started teaching writing in the public school, we were using a method called Writer's Workshop, which I highly recommend. It can be adapted to homeschool co-ops. It can be done in families. It can be used just as a component of to adapt to like a one-on-one situation. And I'll share with that a little bit more. So the children absolutely loved writing. They're very, very excited about it. And we knew how to help those who were reluctant writers as well, so they could come along and taste their successes too. So times changed and schools got really big on testing and data. We all know about that. So this was put aside as we don't have time for this. And then the schools were using rubrics and assigned essays. And the big deal was a child might choose between one or two topics, but they were put cold in front of them. They had to write like a test. And the finished product was then evaluated. They were later given their scores and told what they did, and there was just no chance for them to really embrace their writing, and they would cringe. The children would cringe at having to do this. So writing went from being a real joy to being a necessary requirement that they just had to grind through. So that's part of what I am about. I want children to really find ways that they can love writing. So we'll look at that, and then also, we want the next generation to know how they can share their Christian faith in their writing, as well as their speaking and their actions and so forth. But and if they go to public school, they may feel that they have to clamp down on all that. But really, children have a lot of freedom in what they can say, what they can write about, but they may not even know how to do it from an authentic way that makes sense to them. So that's something that's very powerful. And in my blog posts, I add in ways that children can be guided in a loving way to consider their faith walk and how they might include it in various topics that are presented. How's that? Is that good enough?
That's you've touched on some very important things. I think most importantly that we do have a message to share, and our children do too. And as parents and educators, we are teaching them how to share what's in their heart and what's on their mind, and to do it in a way that's winsome and effective. So yeah, that's I love that passion. And so let's dive into it a little bit before we get into like the real practical things we're going to talk about. Let's just talk about writing. The word writing can mean so many things to different people, from the skills physically that we need to write to the capacity to tell a story, how do we organize our thoughts, things like that. So talk a little bit about, so our listeners are tracking with us, what we mean when we say we're writing.
All right. So it's a challenge in an hour to try to cover the waterfront of writing, but I am here today to try to share some ideas for beginning writers, so young children, as well as grade school age and middle school and on into high school, how to organize their writing. I'm not going to talk about how to organize an essay, for example. Right. I'm not about that today, but there are some very early writing skills that are so valuable for children, and we all know how important it is to read to our children so that they will want to become readers. Well, talking to them, listening to them, reading to them, having them read to us are all building blocks too for early skills needed for writing. And I'm prepared to talk some more about that.
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
Well, I guess let's start by talking about the atmosphere that we want to create for writing, and just making it an atmosphere that is productive and encouraging for our children.
All right. And I think I'll put a little Christian spin on that one too. So it is nice. Well, let's start with this. Many of us have heard of Mary Engelbreit. I'm trying to see, here we go. I have one of her notepads. You can see she's, some of you might recognize her artwork. It's very charming and it's for children. And when she was 11, 10 maybe, she really wanted to have her own studio. She heard artists have their own studios if they're serious. And she did lots and lots of drawing, even as a child. She started with illustrations from old-fashioned children's books. So her parents cleaned out a linen closet, put in a little desk, and gave her ink and whatever kind of chair they could get in there. And she was so happy to have her own studio. And she said it made her feel like her parents really cared about her artwork. So I think if we, as parents, have a place where the children can go for their writing, that may be very good too for them to really feel special about it. But I also think there needs to be flexibility. So I'll try to explain. So some people have closets that they can capture and remodel and maybe put in some very special things to create the atmosphere. I've seen where people will put in different like they'll have a background and then they'll glue or affix, let's just say affix, different containers for different markers and erasers and paper supplies and so forth. So there you go. But I think, if you know the Montessori method, it's taught that we don't inundate children with too much. We introduce a few materials and they enjoy them, and then we switch it out and introduce some more. So to make a cozy place may mean a beanbag with a clipboard, but not all the time. It may mean that for a while. But it may also mean a little desk, because when we're writing, and especially some children, maybe they have dysgraphia, they may even need an occupational therapist to come in to say how they should sit at the desk and how they should hold the pencil and using a pencil grip and so forth. So we need to accommodate to each child and what are their special circumstances. But I would like to encourage that there are nice things around to inspire the children. Maybe you have a nice picture of Jesus that you can show. This one is it's a Leaning Tree card, and the artist is Danny Hahlbohm, okay, Hahlbohm. And he even writes, he says that Danny is still quick to point out that the Lord has been the true artist throughout his life. So, and then there's another one I'll quickly show. It's a big one that I think this is wonderful artwork here. And this artist has many beautiful pictures of Jesus. So we want our children to feel Jesus is their friend, right? So we want pictures of him, just like we put pictures of our family and friends around the house. And this is by the artist Randy Friemel, Friemel. And, of course, these fellows would have websites. So I think when we put out like different kinds of writing materials in that environment, we can switch it again. Maybe we want to have little scrolls that we make, right, for the children to write. Maybe we want to put in a prayer shawl that they can put around them when they're writing. Maybe we want to put in a helmet and a sword for the armor of God, right? And maybe they want to wear a hat when they're writing. Or maybe, just as simple as this, they want to have a little hat to put on that's their thinking cap. And so they only wear that hat when they're thinking about what they're writing, so someone doesn't interrupt them. So let's see. You want to give them a variety of things again, to choose from, whether it's colored markers, choosing erasers. And I think that's a good idea, choosing the color on the erasers. They can't see it right on the screen, but you get the idea. Yeah. That I'm scoping funny. That if they're going to have to erase anything, let them choose the color, right? No red pens. And,
well, yeah, that's just a really interesting thing that I don't think we often think about is when we're teaching our children how to write, we are always more about like just get something on a piece of paper. And what I hear you saying is number one, that we need to inspire our children. And so the things that we surround them with, like even as you mentioned, understanding that Jesus is in that with them in the writing. And as an adult, I know that when I sit down to write, I pray before I write because I'm inviting the Holy Spirit to inform what I write. And so why not teach that practice to our children right from the get-go? And then I love your ideas of just bringing in these whimsical things that depending on the child is going to just make it fun and special and like, oh, I get to go write because I'm going to put on my helmet or whatever, or my cape or whatever it might be that your child gets excited about. So that's I really can get on board with that. I like making things fun for our kids too. So that's neat. You mentioned the presence of God in our writing. And so how does prayer factor into that for our children? And how do you encourage that for our children as they write?
Okay. So, yes, I totally agree. Just as authors, that I encourage parents to pray with their children before they start writing because we want to praise God. He's given us the living word, and we've through that learned about our loving Jesus, and we learned about the leading of the Holy Spirit. So all of those things are really important to tune into right from the get-go. Talk about atmosphere. We want that, as a part of our writing, and to let them know that Jesus is coming alongside them to help them with their writing. There are different ways we can pray with them about that. Maybe they want to make the prayer and then watch the adult write down the prayer. So modeling writing, that's an example of modeling writing to show them. They might get really excited about that. They also might want to sing a prayer, or again, depending on the child's disability, maybe they do hand motions, maybe they sign the prayer or the Bible verse. And I will mention that, as you heard, I have been with Child Evangelism Fellowship for a long time through their Good News Clubs, and one can often just go on the phone, go on YouTube, and type in CEF, that stands for Child Evangelism Fellowship, and then Bible songs or Bible verse songs. And there are a ton of them on there, and you can pick out some. There's one that's called a peace song, and if we had more time, we would do it now. But it's John 14:27, and it is absolutely a prayer. It's Jesus talking to us and to the disciples about how he's going to give us special peace, and he's going to be there for us. And it's amazing that he's saying this just before what happens to him, right, with the crucifixion and everything. He is so reassuring, even then, wanting to be reassuring to us, no matter what. So if the children want to learn to sing it or do the motions, or both is great. And it gives them a little bit of moving around. So sometimes that's a nice way to break up writing, too, is a little activity that's still focused on what we're trying to do.
Well, those are great. It gives a whole new perspective on just getting ready to write and getting in the right mindset and letting the creativity part of writing start flowing through us and through our kids.
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
Now, a lot of our listeners and our homeschooling children that may not yet be writing, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a lot to work on to prepare for writing. So let's talk about just some of the specific things, just ideas that you can give about this pre-writing. Why is it important? Why don't we just hand a kid a pencil and say, start copying letters? There's so much more to it that readies them for the skill of writing.
Okay, so we have talked about the idea that when they see the words in books, it warms them up to the idea that somebody wrote that and they can write something too. And we know the traditional way of teaching the letters, then learning the sounds, writing their names. We all, know about that. So I think I could mention a few things that the listeners might like to know. If your child is having troubles, for instance, holding a pencil, you can put colored hair gel in a Ziploc bag, a freezer bag, and seal it real well. And then they can trace letters into the gel. Or you can, you can make chalkboards at home with chalkboard paint or whiteboards, little whiteboards. But you can also draw whatever it is. Let's say it's a letter, and then your child can use a little square sponge, make it wet, and then they write the letter, and then they can do a dry sponge. Sometimes children need all this tactile, right? Dry sponge and write the letter on top of the wet letter, and then they can go ahead and with a piece of chalk try to write the letter, or whatever implement you're using for that. So I have an acquaintance whose son was in a terrible accident. So he is catching up with what he had before. That happens sometimes. And we all know there are some listeners or viewers here who might have that situation as well. And he can sign. And they communicate that way. And then, because that's a strength of his, we want to build on strengths, then they get the Scrabble tiles out, the letter tiles, and they start to find the letters to form a given word. Maybe they also work in phrases, but I've heard it as given word. So that can be seen. And that, in a sense, is writing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. In a sense, it is writing. I know someone else whose child is autistic and very concrete learner, dutiful, but not crazy about writing yet. And she'll show a picture. Let's say for the purpose of this program, let's just say we had a picture of David and Goliath, okay? And then the idea is to ask the child, what do you see? And when the child says what he or she sees, then the idea is, okay, let's write it. And it might be writing it together, depending on the child. It might be that the child can write a sentence at a time, and building from that. Let me see. Oh, yes, I have here. I was thinking that another kind of writing for early writing skills is, maybe you don't have Christmas cards these days. They're not as common, but you can probably get some off of eBay, I bet, or something like that. But get some Christmas cards and maybe, let's see, cut out the words, right? Cut out the words, and then together with your child, rearrange them. Maybe you can make a different sentence, and they can have fun with that, or try to think, what did it say, and try to put it back together. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's all about trying to have fun, isn't it? But just find different ways. I know people used to say, well, get a cereal box and read the cereal box together. But I think we can use other materials to help with writing. And I think I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but I want to say, Annie, correct me if I'm losing your question, but there are some Bibles. I want to show this one. It's the Action Bible, and they have, most of it's ESV, regular Bible, but they have some graphic novel or comic book, if you want to say, style. And your children may love to do writing like this, where let's say they hear a Bible story, and then give them a chance to retell the story in their own words, and then write down some of the key words that either they said or you think they should know from the story, or both, right? So they have that as like a poster where they can look at that to help them as they then say what they think they want to put into the bubbles for retelling their Bible story.
Right. Yeah. These are all like wonderfully creative ideas, and I think we feel like we're rambling a bit, maybe because there are so many. The sky is the limit when it comes to these ideas. I recall giving my children pictures and then letting them caption them and making little photo albums, things like that, because they're things that they're interested in. They were pictures of something they did, and it made it interesting for them. And also it was in bite-sized amounts. It wasn't like, here, fill 2 pages. It was, let's just take it at the level that we're at and put a little at a time on the paper. And also even things like, I think you mentioned telling, narrating what you see in a picture or what you're thinking about in your head. Even those things are preparing for writing. There's a storytelling aspect to writing, and then there's the physical mechanics of it. We know that the physical mechanics are far more than just our hands. Our shoulders, our trunk muscles are all involved. So it is, you mentioned things like movement, and those are all important to get those muscles developed so a child can do each part of the writing process.
Because if they're being inspired and if they're excited, then they do want to write something.
Yes.
And if they like it, then they might say, let's put it in and make a scrapbook that they can get out different times and share with people and add in pictures to it. And if they're remembering the time they went to a ball game, maybe there's a ticket or something that they can add in. You know how scrapbooks are. So they can make something that's maybe small pieces, but it's still glued together as one beautiful thing that takes on its own shape over time too.
Right. I love how we're really focusing on the motivation, because for kids that struggle to write, that's very demotivating. I mean, when it's hard, who wants to do that? But if you can add some element to it that makes it more exciting, then it provides a reward for the hard work that they're going to do for the writing. So I love that. Love capitalizing on strengths.
Yes.
Find what your child can do and really try to direct your efforts in that area. And they're going to be much more motivated because they're going to be successful.
Yes. And I think it's important to celebrate with the child the completion of each of the stages, whether it's the thinking about, we could call it pre-writing. Pre-writing is more than that. But whether it's the thinking, like getting your topic, celebrate it. Well, how do you celebrate it? Well, I have an idea.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about this. I love celebrations. I think it's biblical to celebrate. Yeah. So let's jump into that a little bit, see how we can celebrate at each level of that writing to keep it going.
Yeah. So, of course, traditionally in schools, there might be a sticker chart, and that's nothing wrong with that. You know, they've reached a certain point and they get a sticker. Kids like stickers, and they can put a sticker on. There's some nice Christian stickers out there. That's all good, well and good. And I'm not saying don't do that, but you may want to bump it up a little more. I was looking online yesterday, and on Amazon, they have this inexpensive church. It's the inside of a church that it's like a Lego. It's not Lego brand, but it's like a Lego. And for different stages of the writing, let's say they finished the pre-writing. Well, hey, that's the foundation. So maybe you can build the foundation. So that's the celebration. They can now build the foundation. If this is a child that likes hands-on activities. And then the different stages, like when they've done the first draft, right? Then maybe by that time they're putting up the windows and they see the light of God coming in, and et cetera. But let's just say the child doesn't go for that as a incentive. And by the way, you might want a menu. How are we going to celebrate? So they can choose what they want. But maybe then pick some other things that build good Christian character. Like maybe they want to go and you have kind of have to anticipate this, right? But maybe you have a little house plant or a little outdoor plant that they can plant after they have achieved a certain level with the project of writing. Maybe they need some time to play with a kitten in the house or something like that. To, again, all of those work in nurturing and responsibility and God's creations. All of those are good rewards to give them. Maybe they want to paint a picture of what they've written so far. Now, granted, some children do actually think better if they draw or doodle before they write. And I think it's good to keep that in mind, that some of them are just so naturally that way. I wouldn't say don't do that. Let them do the natural. But if they're like hanging in there and postponing the writing too much, it's time to say, okay, well, we'll finish this as a reward when you get your so-and-so 15 minutes, 20 minutes of writing done today. So those are some things. There were other things that would work out well. Again, maybe singing a song, maybe ordering a song if they're a musician. Let them pick out a hymn that they want to have to play on the guitar or the piano. There can be all kinds of nice rewards at different stages of the writing.
Right. Again, our children are so different that what motivates one won't motivate another. So we have to just kind of tune into what floats their boat, what'll set their heart on fire there with that. And I like how you mentioned you can even bring them into it, saying, when we do good things, when we work hard, then we do want to reward you. And so think about what would that reward look like. And our rewards, often, I think almost all can be very educational. They're just at it. They may think, oh, this is play, but it's educational. So you can give them that menu that keeps the learning going. But my kids love to be able to make little books and things like that they could share with other people. I think that's when they get to see the purpose for their writing beyond just there's something on a piece of paper and, that's now in a notebook or folder somewhere. But when it comes out and they get to show someone else or read it to them or have it read, in the company of a grandparent, siblings, your pet, whatever,
That's very rewarding. Even a stuffed animal. Very rewarding.
That's right.
And then you can ask the grandparents to please tell the child how it has blessed them as well, so they get some good feedback to motivate them further. There's another little thing that kind of comes into my mind here. So I have this Easter egg. I don't know if the print comes out backwards on the screen. I don't know. Anyway, here's another idea for a reward. These are a little hard to come by. This happens to be Billy Graham's Bible Promises, but they're little cards, and there are other ways you can get this. But the one I pulled out says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. So you can, before your child knows about it, you can put it in the egg and hide it. Children love to look for things. It's exciting. And the whole discovery approach. And then when they find it, then, they can open it and you can do whatever celebration you want and reading it. And it might turn into another writing assignment, but maybe later. You don't want to, you don't want to balance it. But there's just different ways to have like a little quick game. And yet still, like Annie said, it's a learning because they're looking at the Bible verse. If you do this, I want to encourage that you also take a moment and look in the Bible, whether it's one for an older child or one for a younger child, and show them where it comes. Oh, I can't get that. Show where it comes in the Bible. And like one of these, it'll probably be what story is it connected to. It's not going to be matching exactly. But in the other Bible, it's good for children to actually see the source of Bible verse truth.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Those are all great ideas, and I encourage our listeners to just think about their own children and what will motivate them, and just ways again to make it fun.
To make it fun.
We often wonder as parents teaching this, like, what kind of structure should we provide? How much structure do our children need when they're developing their writing skills?
Okay. So I might shift a little more towards the second grade, third grade. If you're thinking like grades, 8 and up for some of my thinking here. But so we want to inspire them and get them excited and so forth. And there's so many beautiful ways we can do that. We can talk more about that. But they also need support, and they need us. You don't have to share your goal with them necessarily, but you set realistic goals of what you want them to achieve. Maybe it is to write a sentence. Maybe it is to write a paragraph. But maybe it is to write a letter, right? But set a realistic goal and figure out how you can help them get to that point and make it bite-sized so they don't get overwhelmed. But there might be certain stages of the writing where they start to feel lost. And one thing, this is put out in the literature to help people with dysgraphia. But honestly, when I taught third grade and fourth grade and fifth grade, graphic organizers were used a lot for everybody. So I have a little snap here of one, but it's usually much larger than that. But the idea is that there are worksheets that have all the key elements in it to help with their pre-writing or their planning. So, like, for example, this one, hamburger-style graphic organizer. It's like a hamburger bun. So the top of the bun is the topic sentence, and then the tomato, the hamburger, and the lettuce are supporting details, and then the bottom bun is the conclusion, and that's your 5-sentence paragraph. But anyway, there are lots and lots of graphic organizers available online, and that can help with providing some structure, because children generally do need structure. And if they also understand the stages of writing, that's what I talked about a little bit earlier with the writer's workshop, that each stage is very important. And as authors, and I think most adults would understand this, that coming up with the idea is powerful. It's what spurs you on. So that's a legitimate component of their writing, is the pre-writing and coming up with their idea. And how do you enrich them to come up with those ideas? Do you go on certain field trips? Do you watch certain video clips? Do you read certain books? Do you interview certain people? So forth and so on. How do you enrich them? But once they come up with their idea, we don't want them to be overwhelmed. So just say, well, just pick one. Just pick one that you think you'd like to learn about. Well, that's where it's often called KWL chart comes in handy, where the child can write down what he or she knows, what he or she wants to learn, and then on a given topic, of course, and then to go ahead and work on that. And then at the end, then list what did he or she learn about that topic. So those are the components for building then their sentences and their report writing, or however you want it to write. It gives them some structure. So all of this is called working towards the first draft. And when they write the first draft, a lot of children think they're done. And if they're happy with it, that's great. And it may be that particular topic needs to be just done there. But they need to also be encouraged a little further along that it's okay to revise. And that's not a punishment, and that's not a criticism of their work or anything like that. It's like polishing a gemstone. How can we revisit it? So revisiting oftentimes means giving it a little bit of time, certainly at least a day, before they go back and take a look. But if they haven't explored that with other people's work, it may be painful for them to try to do that on their own work. So maybe that begins with storybooks. For instance, we all know the one, I think, about we know the 3 pigs, and then we know the one from the viewpoint of the wolf, right? So it just switch out like how stories could be different when you're reading books. Maybe think how could they have changed that ending, or how could they have made this more funny, or how could she have been kinder? Just things like that to get them thinking that it's okay to think about changing up stories and revising things. And I'm going to pause there because I think I'm talking too much, and I want to hear your
Yeah, I want to just touch back on the structure. Talking about that structure that you offered, I love the point that you make that children do feel overwhelmed sometimes by the just the possibilities of, you could write about anything, or what goes first, what goes second, and those graphic organizers do really help. I remember doing that hamburger one actually some years ago. But even authors, adult authors who are writing fiction, or even me I write nonfiction mostly. I do organize my thoughts first, and I have some idea of where I'm going, how I want to start it out, what information I want to include. I may do a little outline of some sort, and certainly fiction authors, many of them do the same thing, where they write maybe some description of characters, or just kind of plot out the action in some basic form before they actually start writing. So I think when our kids get that outline, that's almost like, that's a big green light then. If they have the skills to, put their pen, their writing instrument, whatever it is, to paper or computer or whatever, that when they have that organizer, it just gives them a green light to start doing it. It puts some guardrails on the writing so that they know what lane they're in. So I love that idea. And then, well, you started to touch on this idea of feedback, and you're right. I remember, my kids would finish one thing and then they were like, "Oh, isn't that good? I'm done," and I know. I know as an adult, I have to come back to my work. It feels great to finish, but I rarely put something out to publish until I let it sit for a couple days. Mm-hmm. And then I go back and read it again. I'm like, I could, change a few things. You notice it after the fact. And I like how you're talking about making that a positive experience, letting kids know that this is a normal thing. You can hear where you can improve, and they're going to feel even better about their finished product when they have tweaked it, or learn how to evaluate their own work after you model it for them. And I love the idea of, instead of just doing their work, you said, pick something else that you're reading. Take the book that you're reading and talk about how that could be changed. How could the ending change, or could the point of view be different, or something like that? That's fun. And it teaches them the skill of critiquing, and then they'll be able to hopefully transfer it to their own work even.
Right. And how to have fun with adjectives and verbs. They have various ways. You can have a treasure box full of adjectives and verb cards, and maybe they pull them out and play with some sentences and see if they want to switch in or add in some of the cards that they see there. So just to play with words, to have fun with it, absolutely. And when I've done writer's workshop with homeschoolers, I like natural things. So I had these seashells. Each child had a seashell, and then whatever they were working on at the given time, they would put into their seashell. Like this one says pre-writing. My finger. It says pre-writing. And so when I would go around and check the children as they were writing, because Writer's Workshop includes also teachers meeting one-on-one with the writers during the writing workshop time, I would know where they were. So I would know how to approach them in what they're working on. And so then, again, that makes, like you're saying, makes it legitimate that they're building blocks. And so then we had we had first draft. There we go, first draft. And we had revise. And then, I want to talk more about edit in a moment, but we had edit, and then we had publish. There you go, publish. But when with Writer's Workshop, after a session, we would gather as a group. And again, a family can do this. A family can divide up. Maybe they want to do the whole story as a family, or maybe they want, as a homeschool group, to do. Anyway, they can gather together, and then those who want to can say, yes, I'd like to be an author's chair. And they share what they've been working on, regardless of what stage it's at. Because they may say, this time I'd like to get some feedback about whether you like my story.
Yes.
And then everyone knows this is not the time to criticize. And then besides, I don't call it criticize, I call it constructive feedback. And people are encouraged to, before they ever give constructive feedback, to first give a compliment. Compliment. And so anyway, yeah. So for the kids to begin to realize that there are different legitimate stages in their writing.
If you set that expectation right at the beginning, like with those little signs you had, they're like, oh, well, that's each part is going to happen at some point. And then it's all normal. Whereas if you let them just think in their own mind, well, I finished, the story came to the end and now we're done, so it's you're providing that structure as their teacher to understand that there are different components.
Right. And not everything has to be brought to totally done and ready to share, what we call published, but some things can just stay as is. And because maybe the child wants to work on it later, like maybe it's a poem and they think, I need some time on this one. I'm going to put this aside, just like an artist does, right? I'm going to put this one aside. I'm going to work on something else and see how far that gets me. And I think that's okay to let them have that room for expression.
Yeah, these are all good things. I like just how we can, at every stage of this, just thinking about what our children's level is and picking up there and finding a fun motivation and a way to provide an achievement with a realistic goal. So there's something that's achieved that they can understand, hey, I did that. And then they are motivated to go to the next level. So and our kids are all at different stages. This always comes into a conversation when we're homeschooling, that your child is not in a race with any other child. We don't need to compare them to what little Johnny is doing, and our neighbor or whatever. But this is just you coming alongside your child and seeing where they're at and helping them take the next growth step in writing.
And the listeners might find it very neat to hear that, for example, let's see where I put my book. Okay. I have a book that was recently published by Lauren Vignola, A Rose from Heaven. And she was a normal child until she was 2. And then she came down with brain cancer. And basically the doctors didn't think she was going to live. Well, the story tells about how many times she experienced what she believes are miracles from God and how she was able to be healed in different ways. She still has disabilities, but when the doctor said she's going to be blind and never see again, and then she was able to see. And when she wrote her book, she wrote it with big keys on a keyboard, and it talked it back to her. So she had family and a friend or more who would help her with how she would organize her thoughts and make sure it would be clear to the readers. But she's written a book, right? So that should be an inspiration. And then there's an author people may have heard of called Avi, A-V-I. And he still has dysgraphia. And my goodness, he's a fabulous writer of children's books, middle grade. I particularly like the book Secret School, but he's written adventure stories in historical settings and very captivating. And he's won Newbery Awards. That's the best, right? Newbery Awards. Yep. And he has dysgraphia. So he's come along with it through the years. And he had a post just recently where he said, well, spell checks really helps a lot. And so I'm thinking, going back just a bit ago when we were talking about when a child gets stuck in the writing. I had a child who was middle schooler, and I was working with him, not my own child, another child, and he was stuck on writing. He get a writer's block. Everyone can get writer's block. And so I said, okay, do you have a cell phone? He did. We put it on. I said, why don't you talk about it? And he got to see his words forming on the whatever notes or whatever he was using for his app. And he was thrilled. He was thrilled. He got unstuck. And then from that, he was able to go ahead and do his own writing as well. So I'm not saying all should be technology, but there is a helpful time for it, I think. I think it's exciting. Yeah. It can be used as a wise tool. But parents will certainly say, too, for fine motor skills and learning how to write, that we need to stick with our tried and true old ways that we have with normal writing and good posture and how do you hold a pencil and how do you form those letters. And if a child has trouble, I'm going to go way back and just give me a second, Annie. But if a child's having troubles with like heights on letters, there are different ways you can do it, right? Like you can say sky for the tall letters and you might say grass for the shorter letters and ground for the ones that go below the line. And maybe the child gives you a thumbs up, right? For each time the letter is going to go high to the sky, maybe a fist for the ones on the line, and maybe a thumbs down for the one that goes down the line. But we know tactile, right? We want to sometimes assist them with learning their letters. So that's my ramble. All right, I'm ready.
Yeah, well, there's lots of little tricks like that will stick in the mind of the child, especially like you mentioned when there's something tactile that or physical that goes along with it. That's important for many of our children.
A finger between a word to get the spacing in can help. I know sometimes people call it the spaceman, putting that little band there. I wouldn't want to put a device there myself. I think the finger works better. Maybe they can draw a little face on the fingernail. I don't know.
Well, there's all kinds of things. We get really creative when we have children who learn differently. Doesn't mean they don't learn at all. So we want to keep that in mind as parents, that even a child who maybe because of their disability can't do a certain part of the writing process, you've already touched on this, that there are some accommodations we can make, so we can maybe bypass that one thing and let them keep growing in another area that they can do. We find the part that they can do and really work on it. We can modify activities. We can come up with little workaround, like cues, like you've mentioned. So sometimes we have just a couple minutes left. If there's any thoughts you have about a child who maybe can't do a certain part of the process, but can do something else, how a parent can sort of work around that.
Okay. Well, also, it's very important for children to see the parents modeling what is being expected. And they're learning a great deal, even if they can't do all the pieces. Just seeing an example in work. And of course, again, parents have to decide how to modify that based on their children. So there can just be a sweet agreement when you're working on something that if they get to a part that is going to be really hard for them, you say, well, how about if we do this part together? Or how about if you let me do it for a moment, but you don't want to do too much, let them feel empowered, and but just say, okay, we'll just do this, or we'll do a workaround. Life is full of workarounds for all of us. So maybe there's a special workaround for them to hop over a step that's going to be a little too hard for them. And that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've given a lot of great tips to parents, and also, as you just mentioned, empowered them to adjust freely based on their own children's needs and desires and motivations, and to just bring them into that process where it becomes fun and exciting for them to write instead of a dreaded chore. I know I could have used some of these tips back when I was teaching the writing to my daughter, for sure. But I see, we're getting to the end of our time together here, Heidi. If there's a final thought you want to add, feel free. And then I'd like to just make sure listeners know how they can stay in touch with you, how they can access some of your resources.
All right. I'll just add in that when a child has written something and you're wanting to ease them into revision, you might ask them to think about it like a movie or a retelling, and ask them, is it clear? Is it clear to them? And ask them to read it aloud. Reading aloud is very helpful, very helpful. And it might be the next day because that's helpful too. Give it a little time to season. Mm-hmm. But if it's not clear to them when they're reading aloud, chances are it's not clear to the readers either. And not to worry, because there are ways to fix the writing to make it more clear. But if they notice that maybe they'll notice that the setting needs a little more description, or the characters' emotions aren't really coming across like they want them to. What can they do to make it more clear? So I think that would be one thing I would suggest for them. And I have other blog posts that you're welcome to look at newsongpress.net/blog. And there is the current one is about writing tips for children who are disabled. And then at the end of that post, there's a list, a little archive of the different topics for the different blog posts that are there. So that can help you to see, like maybe you want to help your child with writing about an adventure this summer, or a how-to writing, or writing about animals, things like that. And in fact, I'll make a real quick talk that there's a woman who wrote a beautiful book called, I'm going to draw a blank on my title, but Howie's, I'm not remembering it, but it's a story about a donkey who leads Jesus into Jerusalem. And he comes across as he's disabled, because he doesn't have the right kind of hee-haw sound. And through the story, you realize that God gifted him with the hallelujah sound that he can make, praising Jesus as he goes. That
sounds sweet.
It's a very sweet storyline. So I think that to look at that post can help people who are trying to look for, there's more than one post, to help look for storylines, to help see how to shape the story.
Yes. Well, I would also mention that Heidi does have a book, a charming book that I think your middle grades would really enjoy. And if you go to her website, you're going to find a free teaching guide for this book, Victor Survives Being a Kid. So that's a picture of the book there. You can learn more about it at her website. I would also note that all of these links that we're talking about will be in the show notes as well. So you can find it there. And I want to just say thank you so much, Heidi, for sharing these practical tips to help us motivate our children to love to write for the glory of God.
Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless all of you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, Heidi. And now I want to tell you about our next episode of Empowering Homeschool Conversations. We will be rethinking ADHD, giving attention to dreams, humor, and discoveries. Sounds like that's going to be a good one. Until then, take care and God bless. I look forward to seeing you soon.
I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
Hey there, it's Nicole Eunice, host of the How to Study the Bible podcast, where every single week we join together to encounter God through His Word. You can subscribe at lifeaudio.com.